Hello, weirdos. Welcome back to my channel. My name is EmmaAbe, and we have a little guest with us. Oh, you gonna let people see her face? It's the baby. She's being so cute. She's always cute, though. Yes, you are. So what are we doing today? Well, today we're going to be going over the worst books that I read in 2020. Asterisks, disclaimers, always. So these are just my personal books that I thought were the worst. And like a lot of them weren't even that bad. Like I gave a lot of them, not a lot of them, I gave at least half of them 3 stars. So I struggle getting this list of worst books to 10 usually every year because I strive to read books that I like. And it's a good problem to have. These aren't in any particular order. They go from like the lowest rated to I guess the highest rated. So that is a range from 2 stars to 3 stars. Also, I did my nails like a sparkly matte, and I really like them. It's weird. I'm playing with femininity here, guys. Allow me. Okay, so the first one that I'm going to talk about is Violet Bent Backwards Over the Grass. This is by Lana Del Rey. So this won 2nd place in the poetry category for the Goodreads Choice Awards last year, so in 2020. And that's why I've read it. And honestly, first of all, I'm not a huge poetry person, so that's kind of like already a ding. But also the format kind of pissed me off a little bit. And that was because while I was like reading along and listening, at the same time, the poems in the book came in a different order than it came in the audiobook. And that quite infuriated me. I was constantly like digging around trying to figure out where I was supposed to be, and it really hindered the reading process. So and that is what pissed me off about reading this particular book. And that's kind of why I got a 2 stars. Like, for the actual poems themselves, a lot of them I kind of felt nothing towards. Some of them I felt like, oh, this has a good rhythm, or this has nice, like, repetition of consonants. But I'm not the person to be critiquing the poetry collection. If the poems had been in the same order in the print and in the audiobook, it probably would have gotten a 3. It probably would have been fine. But since it made it so hard for me as a disabled person to engage with the work, it's kind of why I got the date. The next book, number 2, is How to Stop Worrying and Start Living by Dale Carnegie. Dale Carnegie is like a very famous author. He wrote the book like How to like Win Friends and Influence People. He wrote that book that is like constantly like talked about in like the self-help spheres. So this book pissed me off. This one about how to stop worrying and start living. I felt like a lot of the advice wasn't very good, and it was essentially like Christian religious propaganda wrapped up in a self-help bow. I don't have the book anymore because I yeeted it out of my fucking house, but I made like a tick on like all of the like overtly like you should be religious or like you should pray like every day like messages, and I just was like, this is kind of gross because not everybody, Dale Carnegie, in your audience is religious, and that's kind of a slap in the face to all of the non-religious people out there. I'm sure some people find prayer to be very meditative and healing and can help them stop worrying, but it just was very condescending because I remember one particular quote from it was like, even if you're not religious, you should still pray, but it doesn't make any sense. It's like praying to the flying spaghetti monster. It does not make any sense. Yeah, that's kind of how I felt about that entire book. It made me very upset. I will say, though, that there's one piece of advice that I have used, and that is, it was towards the end of the book, and it was advice about sleep. Like, a lot of people have anxiety about sleep. I do. Like, not sleeping causes me to worry, and all of this stuff because you're supposed to get your like 9 hours of sleep at night. His advice was kind of like, well, if you sleep or if when you're sleeping and you find that you cannot sleep and you're not going to sleep easily, instead of worrying about that, just close your eyes, just relax, and if you fall asleep, great. But if you don't fall asleep, guess what? Your body's still resting, and that's good for you. And that's kind of something that I've incorporated to my sleep patterns. And I don't really know if it's helped or hurt my sleep because my sleep is still shit. But it has at least caused like less worry and anxiety. There's that one. The third book that I'm going to talk about is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. Yeah, no, I did not like this. I thought like the actual like narrative, like the writing style and everything like that was fine. I just think the messaging behind the book is a little bit insidious. So I'm sure most of you know, The Midnight Library was very popular. It won the fiction category for the Goodreads Choice Awards last year. That's good. Clearly people have liked it. But essentially you have this woman, she is about to commit suicide, and then right before she does, she's whisked off to this place called the Midnight Library, where each of the volumes in the library is a different path her life could have led down. And she goes through all these books, and you follow her down all of these different pathways, and you learn what her life could have been. I just felt the messaging, it had good intentions, but it kind of is undercut by the book itself, like the actual events that happen in the book. So the book is trying to tell the message that, hey, no matter like what choices you make, you're always going to be a little bit unhappy. There's no perfect choice that you can make about having your world be perfect. So, you know, you just kind of like gotta own your choices and try and like be happy in the world that you're living in now, in your circumstances now. And there are some things that you can like better it, to better it. But you know, like, so that's like a good message. However, it's undercut by the underlying message of, as the main character goes through all of these volumes and goes to all of these different potential lives, she finds herself to be happier in some, and it kind of brings the message that it kind of like subtly gives the message that, hey, if you had made different choices in your past, you would be happier now. Or if you have made different choices in your past, or if you make different choices now, that can help cure your depression. And that's not true. Like, no choice you're going to make is going to cure your depression. Depression is a chemical imbalance in your brain. It's not something that you can like fix just by willing it to go away. That's not how it works. And I just felt like it was kind of gross to imply that you have like some sort of active control over like fixing your physical depression in your brain, your chemical imbalance, by choices that you make in your life in terms of like where you go to school or who you date, those kind of choices. And I know in the book that she gets diagnosed with situational depression. However, that does not come up until the very end of the book. And throughout the entire book, you're kind of led to believe that she has depression, big D depression, not situational depression. I just thought that that was kind of fucked up and not cool messaging. And that's why this book ends up on this list. The next book is House of Earth and Blood. This is by Sarah J. Maas. This also won the fantasy awards, the fantasy section for the Goodreads Choice Awards last year in 2020. So I read this. It was long. It was 800 pages. That it did not need to be 800 pages. This was the first Sarah J. Maas that I had ever read, and suffice it to say, I will never read another Sarah J. Maas again. The main issue that I have with the book, aside from the usual criticisms of, you know, having like a fan fiction-y writing and certain tropes, which like most of those I can honestly forgive. I mean, there's some certain parts of the Omegaverse that she uses in her writing that I just don't gel too well with me. And that's not to say that I don't like the Omegaverse. I actually do. Just the parts of the Omegaverse that she draws from are not the parts that I like. So a lot of it just stocks up to personal preference a lot of the times. But my main issue is I felt severely queer-baited reading this book. I was getting major sapphic vibes from the main character and the main character's best friend. Sarah J. Maas like was just like, nope, no queerness, no lesbians. Are you cute? Are you kidding me? Sapphics? Who are they? Like the entire time in the book, and it just severely irritated me because I was feeling like seeing the actions of the characters that were taking, that they were lesbians, that they were sapphic. The main character at least was bisexual, something like that. That the main character and her best friend were in love with each other. And that stayed true the entire book. And I felt like Sarah J. Maas was just trying to tell us that no, the main character is actually in love with the male protagonist. But she didn't do a good job of showing it. Like, she showed the love between the main character and the main character's best friend. Yeah, it entirely turned me off of all of Sarah J. Maas's work, and I will never read another thing from her again unless I absolutely have to, which I probably won't. It just really, really hurt me inside. The next book on this list is An Abundance of Catherines by John Green. And I think that John Green's fiction is just not for me. We don't get along. I just felt like the main character was being in his head. I didn't really like his headspace. I felt like he was a little bit bratty and entitled, and I honestly kind of thought the book was really boring. I also didn't like the way that he treated his best friend. I believe his best friend was Muslim and also like larger, like a plus size person, and the level of just fat jokes and stuff in that just didn't sit well with me. And I mean, I also recently DNF'd a John Green book, so I just think that John Green and me do not jive well, especially when he writes from the perspective of a man. I haven't read all of John Green's work, and I don't think I will try to read any more of his fiction because I just don't think it's for me. The next book I actually gave 3 stars, and that is Fangs by Sarah Anderson. And the only reason it is on this list is because I think the marketing behind this book and what it is kind of sold as is not what you get. So you kind of get this idea of, oh my gosh, it is this romance between a vampire and a werewolf. And you're gonna learn all about like the shenanigans that they get up to. However, what it actually is a series of vignettes or memes of what funny things would kind of happen if there was a relationship between a vampire and a werewolf. You don't really get to know the vampire or the werewolf at all. You don't get to see why they like each other. It's just, oh my gosh, would it be so funny that she can't enter his house unless he invites her in? That sort of things. And, you know, I think it's fine, but it's just the advertising and what you got did not align. That's why it's on this list. The next book is The Queen of Nothing. This is by Holly Black. This is the 3rd book in the Folksvare series. Did not like the series. I will say, this 3rd book, I liked the best out of all 3 of them. Still did not like any of them, and I will not continue reading anything else that is in this series because it's just not for me. And it's a simple matter of these books are not for me, and it's honestly just a personal preference taste thing. I'm not super into like the fairy version of fantasy that we've been getting in like the past 10 years. Not saying that it's bad. It's just not to my taste. That's all I'm going to say about that one. The next book I'm going to talk about is The Path Between the Seas. This is by David McCullough. You want to say hi? Do you want to say hi? So David McCullough is a like world-renowned historian. He wrote the biography of John Adams that the HBO show is based off of. I own it out there somewhere. It's on my shelves somewhere. And I've just learned, I've read 3 of his books now, and The Path Between the Seas just kind of solidified that me and David McCullough just do not get along. And it's not that he is a bad writer or a bad historian. It's just, I personally do not gravitate towards his books when I want to learn about history. I have a hard time exactly why that is. I think part of it is because the way he tells history is very much from a traditional point of view, and I prefer to see things in a wider scope lens. I like to see things from different perspectives other than just the perspectives of the white man or the colonizers. And he does it a little bit, but I just prefer a lot more expansion. So The Path Between the Seas is a factual like account of, you know, the building of the Panama Canal. I think I would have preferred to read a book that is from the perspective of the population in Panama, the conflict that went into seizing Panama from Colombia. And a lot of his books are written in the perspective of the conquerors, or the people who are in power, and less of the people who are not in power. Some of his other books that he wrote about, he talked Pioneers. Pioneers is another example of when he talks about the Western expansion and the Manifest Destiny in America. A lot of that was told from the colonizers' point of view, from the settlers' point of view. It's interesting, but he does not touch on like the Native American experience and what it was like for those people. And quite simply, like, I just prefer to read both sides. Does that make any sense? Like, in my history, I kind of want a more balanced view of what is happening rather than just the history written by the victors. I think history written by the victors is what David McCullough writes. And yeah, I don't think I will ever be reading another David McCullough book again. I actually got rid of a bunch of the ones that I still owned, because I was like, I just don't want to put sink my energy into these really, really long books that I don't wind up enjoying ever. And the last book that I'm going to talk about is Bleachers by John Grisham. This book was put on this list because I just found out that John Grisham and I just don't get along. The Bleachers was a book about all of these people coming together to celebrate the life of their football coach, because their football coach died. So they all talk about what it was like a football player for his team. And honestly, I just found the book boring. Thank God it was so short. And it just had this level of Americana to it that I just didn't jive with. And it just kind of made me think, well, there's a bunch of really good books that I want to read in this world. And I don't really want to read books with heavy, heavy Americana. And maybe it's just because I'm not a huge football fan. Maybe there was a different John Grisham book that I should have read. But I actually also got rid of all of my John Grisham books. I didn't have many. But I was just like, you know what? I did not enjoy The Bleachers. I don't think I'm going to enjoy any of his other work. However, that being said, if you guys do have a John Grisham book that you think I would like, leave it down in the comments and I might check it out. It will be low on my list, but I will give it a try. So there you go. I started off with 10, realized that one of the books I had read in 2022. So I'll have to save that book to put on my list for next year. So you actually wound up getting 9 books, the 9 worst books that I read last year. I think in the future, I will only be talking about books in these wrap-ups that get that 2 stars that I don't really enjoy. And I'm not going to really worry so much about rating that 10 number, unless I feel super strongly about some of the other books. Well, there you go. What'd you think, baby? Did you like some of the books? Or did you think some of them were stupid too? What do you think? Your stuff? Alright, well, let me know your opinions. Did you really like some of the books that I talked about? What was your reading experience like in 2021? Alright, I'll see you next week. Bye!